It's the week of January 18th, 2013, and we've got some exciting stuff to talk about this week. First off, we're going to talk about a new type of fungus that is inside of a crayfish gut. Now you're thinking, what could be less exciting than fungus in a crayfish's, intestines? Well, a lot of things. But here's why this is pretty darn neat and has really big implications for environmental conservation. So, there have been die-offs for quite some time that really haven't been able to be fully explained. There are different viruses that can impact frog and amphibian populations. They're called ranaviruses. But there seemed to be something more that was just unknown. I mean, how was this stuff getting there? And when everything was dead, why was it staying there? And more so, when the amphibians had died, why were the new frogs and amphibians that were coming into these previously impacted areas, why were they suddenly dying off? It just wasn't well explained. Well, some scientists out of UC Berkeley published a paper in the last week, and it seems they're onto something. What they found is that there is this fungus, and this fungus actually lives in the intestines of crayfish. They looked at two species of crayfish. In Massachusetts, just as a sideline, we have approximately 25 species of native and non-native crayfish. So they looked at two of them, which tend to be a little bit more invasive. And also for New England, it's outside their range, and they tend to be more aggressive and dominating when they move outside their range, hence the name invasive. So anyway, what it is that the fungus that's in the intestines, it kills a certain number of the crayfish, but the crayfish move up and down the different drainage ways between the ponds, the vernal pools. They're in highway drainages, streams. They are able to release a chemical, which to my knowledge is not known yet, the component of the chemical. But anyway, it kind of goes out like an aquatic gas, and it just infects the entire water area. The thing that makes this really neat is that the pathology, the pathogen of this fungus is able to live outside of the host, outside of the crayfish, for approximately 12 weeks. So if you can imagine, the crayfish go in, they've got the fungus in their gut, they go into the water, the chemical is secreted, and it pretty much contaminates that whole water area. Now I'm speaking of this being smaller water areas, although if you have a number of crayfish, then it can infect a larger area. So it infects this entire water area. Now let's just say the crayfish die. Well, that water is still going to be infected for 12 weeks. So during that 12 weeks, it's going to be killing off the amphibians and the frogs that are in that area. Now let's just say within the first 3 weeks, the crayfish die, the frogs die, the salamanders die. It's just a really rough day for critters with porous skin. For the next couple of weeks, any critters that come into that area are going to be potentially impacted and may die as well. So you may have anywhere between 1 and 3 die-offs once the crayfish are actually eradicated. More so, if this is attached to a drainage, you're going to potentially have more crayfish coming in and out of this drainage. So it's going to be constantly refreshing the pathogen or the fungus within the water source. This has great implications for amphibian management. The implications are this. I probably should go into that first. The implications are this. In the conservation aspect, they would really need to be isolated so that this pathogen can run its course and be eliminated from the water source. One way of doing this might be on the smaller wetland areas, to block out all current critters from leaving the pool, block the migration routes of the crayfish, and leave it there quarantined or taken out of circulation for a certain number of weeks, say 14 weeks, which I think is going to be, close to 3 months, 4 months, which is almost unfortunately a season up here in New England. By isolating those barriers, there isn't going to be any migration for the crayfish to be able to go upstream, downstream, move somewhere else, or infect another pool. The downside is that, well, you might have a pretty significant die-off of amphibians. Unfortunately, if you don't do that, then the die-off can keep happening on a regular basis. I don't know what their sensitivity is to frost. It may be that this only occurs continuously, perennially, in deeper waters where the crayfish are able to have water to live in. But then again, if they're migrating back and forth, that's a whole different story as well. Implications in terms of, say, site design, that's going to be interesting because the site design, when you have buildings or structures there, they're often linked to roads. Or let's just say you're linking it or doing a highway repair or a drainage repair. Or you're increasing the size of a drainage area or a drainage ditch or something because a residential area has expanded and you need to be able to carry that stormwater flow. Well, now you've increased the size and the exposure to crayfish having a better migration route to go back and forth to two different pools. This is going to need to be taken into consideration to understand, okay, if we've got this, if we're putting in a new ditch or we're expanding a ditch or we're making it more available to these crayfish, how is that going to potentially impact or increase the migration routes from this ditch over to this pool 500 feet away or 200 feet away or 100 feet away? How can we manage it ahead of time? How can we reduce the potential impacts to the surrounding wetland areas with what we want to do? It's something taken into account with every site design and conservation planning, but this is one more element that's likely to come into the conversation. The other implication is the information that environmental scientists are now going to include or should start including in their data reports. When they do a habitat analysis or a vernal pool study or a pond study, whereas crayfish weren't making it high on the list. If you were doing a biological inventory, the most you would be saying is, yep, saw a crayfish, to let you know potentially what type of wetland you're looking at, help you with the characterization or defend your findings of the characterization. Now it's likely to include what species are there, if you can key it to species. It's really, unfortunately, very difficult to key crayfish to species. We're going to be looking at what is there, how many are there, where did you find them. Probably be looking at some water sampling too, to find out what chemicals are there, or potentially having, in more sensitive areas, taking a crayfish and sending it out to a lab and literally having its contents examined to say, okay, is the pathogen there? That's going to become, I think, a new or potential new reality for environmental scientists to be aware of. Probably know about it ahead of time rather than walking into a hearing or a discussion or anything else and having somebody from an environmental group say, well, what about this? And tossing that out there as a way of what we call bleed 'em dry, which is where studies and tactics are used to take as much money out of the pockets, out of the study as possible, in hopes that so much money is drained from the project proponent that they go bankrupt and have to withdraw their project, thus keeping the area unbuilt or unchanged or, well, such. Thank you for joining us for this week's Conservation and Coffee, and we'll see you next week. And potentially I'll actually have coffee instead of a cup of tea. Have a good week, stay safe, remain ever curious. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Pinterest if you want to. What can I say? We're social. And you're always welcome to reach me at scarpenter, first initial, last name, at blueliontraining.com.